Alright guys, this is Colonial America, Chapter 3, Section 3 and 4 for your second online lecture. You are going to complete your input on these notes. Then you will complete an output on these notes for your homework. Okay? Moving on. So first we're going to start with the middle colonies. The middle colony started with New Amsterdam. It was a Dutch colony that was becoming very wealthy as a busy seaport. Now New Amsterdam is going to become a very famous city in the future. The English ships that sailed in here and Peter Stuyvesant surrendered the colony without a fight. The English wanted it because it was very rich, making lots of money for the Dutch. The British took it over, and King Charles II gave the colony to his brother, the Duke of York, and the Duke of York renamed it New York. And it grew quickly. 1691 was allowed to elect its first legislature. Here we have a map of all the middle colonies. New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. We have the major exports, what was being bought and sold, where things were being done. We have a lot of fur trapping, cattle, small amounts of tobacco, iron, shipbuilding, and timber. We also have a map of what New Amsterdam looked like in 1664. This is now modern day New York City, most likely Manhattan. The small island really grew into quite a major city for the world. And this is what we're looking at today. So the same downtown area about 300 years later. New Jersey, a gift from the Duke of York to Lord John Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. Promise made by Carteret and Berkeley. Freedom of religion, trial by jury, and a representative assembly. Here we have another map of the middle colonies. A little bit earlier one, we see how small New York was at first. Pennsylvania was beginning to grow. East Jersey, West Jersey, then the three counties of Delaware. This was a commemorative quarter that came out showing the crossing of the Delaware River into New Jersey by George Washington. Pennsylvania and Delaware are very linked. William Penn was a Quaker, that's a form of Christian religion, from England who was owed money by King Charles. King Charles gave William Pennsylvania, so the debt was forgiven so that William could set up his holy experiment, a place that would be based on religious principles. William planned Philadelphia. He also negotiated treaties with the Native Americans. And he wrote the first Pennsylvanian Constitution. And these three lower counties that were mentioned on the other map end up becoming Delaware. Now we see the city of Philadelphia map on the right, and then on the bottom left, what you see there is a statue of William Penn that's on top of a building in Philadelphia. There's William Penn, kind of looks like the Quaker Oat man that you see on your oatmeal and on other Quaker Oat cereal. The southern colonies. Here we have them: Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. If we look at this map, you start to see what was the main export. Tobacco, huge. Cattle, not so huge. Furs, huge. You got the mountains right there. Naval supplies, some trees. So we start with Maryland. It began as a Catholic colony, founded by Lord Baltimore. Planted tobacco, corn, wheat. The Mason-Dixon line was created to separate the boundary between Pennsylvania and Maryland. So this dispute that happened over the boundary between the two colonies is why we have the Mason-Dixon line, which now kind of classifies the difference between the North and the South. And in 1649, the Act of Toleration was enacted. So here's a map of the Mason-Dixon line. We see where Delaware is in this equation, Maryland, modern-day Washington, D.C., the Chesapeake Bay. We have Virginia to the south. Speaking of Virginia, the colonists in Virginia began moving away from the coast. Jamestown was founded near the Atlantic Ocean. People wanted to start moving west. Nathaniel Bacon, he was a wealthy planter upset with the way the colony was being governed, decided it was time for a little rebellion. So he attacked Jamestown, actually won, but died before he could become the new leader of the colony. The Carolinas, one of the most beautiful parts of the United States. Started as one colony by King Charles, Carolina means Charles Land. Charlestown, largest city, later called Charleston, which is in South Carolina. John Locke, a very important guy, wrote the Constitution of Carolina. And it eventually splits into North Carolina and South Carolina. Many of you might have been to Myrtle Beach once in your life, which is in South Carolina. We have a map here of Carolina. We have Florida to the south. We see Virginia right there. So, moving on. How did they make money? Tobacco, timber and tar, deer skin, lumber, and rice. All very good ways for early colonies to become very wealthy. And not to be forgotten, indigo, otherwise known as blue gold. Any of you that are enjoying wearing your jeans on a regular basis at home or whatever, blue jeans are dyed by indigo back in the old days. That's where that blue jeans came from. Also, helping the Carolinas and many of the southern colonies with slave labor. In southern Carolina, relied heavily on slave labor because of the labor needed for cultivation of rice. In 1708, in the Carolinas, 50% of the settlers were African, and rice cultivation was really difficult and needed a lot of time-consuming labor in the rice paddy fields. By 1729, the colony split into North and South Carolina. And we have a picture of slaves working the rice paddy fields. Georgia. Georgia's an interesting colony. This was founded by James Oglethorpe. It was a place for those that owed money in England to have a fresh start away from England. So what Oglethorpe did is he built a small town called Savannah, Georgia. And here he banned slavery, Catholics, and rum, all things that he thought were bad. So there's the province of Georgia down at the bottom. That's a Georgian plantation.